The exam board could also ask you about a birth control policy, an attempt to control the population by imposing strict rules about how many children a family could have. This was done most famously in China by the one-child policy. So for our diagram for this, if you want to start off, just draw yourself a large circle. Okay. Small little body coming off it if you want. To remind yourself of this kind of idea of one child, and we're going to put all the information into the head. First off, we just want to split the forehead off, put a bit of hair on him if you want, and just put in there one. Just to remind you that I did a one-child policy. Okay. If you then split the head down the middle, okay, what we're going to look at first is the impacts of the policy, and then secondly, the changes made after 1990. So, impacts. Let's start off with the positives. Not a huge amount, but we do need to consider some of them. Firstly, it resulted in 400 million fewer births. That was really important because the one-child policy was implemented to avoid another famine that China had suffered in 1960. And by having 400 million fewer births, they did actually manage to avoid this. Also, because families only had one child to support and they got a pay rise if they managed to follow the policy, we saw an increase in wealth in China and therefore an increase in standards of living. Standard of living increased, so did people's opportunities to get jobs. There was less competition in the labour market, so people found it easier to get jobs. However, that's probably where the positives end, and there is normally a longer list of negatives. First off, we need to consider something called infanticides. So infanticides were when young girls were killed, either aborted before birth or very soon after birth. This is because girls didn't earn as much money, and what money they did earn normally went to their husband's family. So particularly rural families who needed the guarantee of income from a male son, obviously were more keen to have a boy and therefore killed young girls if they had one so that they could try for a boy again. This resulted in a large gender imbalance where we had 118 boys to only 100 girls. This meant that many men found it hard to find a partner, and we saw an increase in sexual crimes like rape and even female trafficking in China. Another problem with the policy was the fact that 9 out of 10 children that survived the infanticides and ended up in orphanages died within their first year. This was because the orphanages simply weren't prepared and were understaffed for the high number of orphans that they received. On top of this, we saw a problem called the 4-2-1 problem. This is where one child had to support 2 parents and 4 grandparents, obviously putting a huge amount of financial pressure on that one child. Another problem was something referred to as the little emperors. Okay, little emperor there with his crown on. This was particularly prevalent in young boys who were only children and had grown up getting whatever they wanted. Obviously, when they then grew up and had to work in kind of the modern world and have to cooperate with other people, they found this very difficult, and China's business suffered as a result of this. So you can see there's quite a lot of negatives, but also some positives. Now, looking at the changes made after 1990, one of the big changes was the 4-2-1 problem was fixed. What they did was they allowed you, if both yourself and your partner were an only child, to have 2 children. This meant that the financial strain of the family was supported by more people. Another thing that happened was that the Chinese government worked hard to increase people's opinions of girls, so that less girls were being subjected to the infanticides. This meant that more people were willing to keep a girl if they had them. If you lived in the countryside, you were allowed to try for a second child if the first child was a girl. This is so that you had a boy to work on the farm. Finally, due to an increase in people's income over sort of the time that the policy was in place, a lot of people decided just to ignore the policy. They accepted the fines and the pay cut, but decided that they could afford it and had 2 children.